Priory Church of St.Mary, Bridlington, grid reference DA177680, commonly known as Bridlington Priory Church, is a parish church in Bridlington, East Riding of Yorkshire, England, in the Diocese of York. It is on the site of an Augustinian priory founded in 1113 which was dissolved during the dissolution of the monasteries. In 1951 it was designated a Grade I listed building. History. Foundation. Bridlington Priory was founded around 1113 by Walter de Gand for Augustinian canons regular, one of the earliest Augustinian houses in England, with an adjoining convent. Its foundation was confirmed in charters by King Henry I of England. The site had formerly been a Saxon church and nunnery. When complete, the building was over 400 feet long and 75 feet wide, with a transept which was 150 feet long. The first prior is thought to have been called Wishman or Wickerman. Early history. The priory was favoured by kings and the nobles and soon owned land across Yorkshire. The canons from the priory established Newborough Priory in 1145. King Stephen granted the priory should have right to have the property of felons and fugitives within the town and proceeds from the harbour, and later King John gave the priory the right to hold a yearly fair in the town in 1200. During the conflict between Stephen and Matilda, William le Gros, Earl of Albemarle, advanced on the priory and expelled the canons in his campaign against Gilbert de Gant of Hunmanby. He fortified the priory and later gave the priory 6 parcels of land, one at Boynton and the rest in Holderness. Henry IV appropriated the rectory of Scarborough to the priory, which was later confirmed by Henry V, Henry VI and Edward IV. A royal license was also granted by Richard II in 1388 to crenellate the priory with fortifications, but although history tells there were 4 gates, 3 of those gates were in the main priory land: Kirkgate, Westgate, Nungate, and these were used as daily entrances in and out of the building enclosure itself. Only the Bailgate was a fortified entrance standing at the borders, and the priory itself was in fact never walled. The priory also had a large library, which was listed by John Leland shortly before the dissolution of the monasteries. The priory was dissolved in 1538 by Henry VIII during the dissolution of the monasteries. The priory was very wealthy at the time of the dissolution, and its yearly income was estimated to be £547 6s, 11.5d, and owned land stretching from Blubber Houses in the north and Ascombe Richard down to the Spurn Point. The condition of the priory at the dissolution can be gathered from the report of Richard Pollard, who was surveyor of Henry VIII. The church was more than 390 feet in length, surrounded by the chapter house, treasury, cloister, prior's hall, infirmary. All the buildings were destroyed except the nave, which became the parish church, and the gatehouse, which is now the Bailgate Museum. Some of the stones from the old priory were used in the construction of the piers at Bridlington. The last prior, William Woad, was executed at Tyburn for his part in the Pilgrimage of Grace. Restoration. For 3 centuries after the dissolution, the nave continued to be used as the parish church, and only a third of the building was actually used by the congregation. From 1846 the parish began to raise funds to restore the church, and it was partially re-roofed. The west window was opened out and filled with stained glass. The interior was whitewashed, and the east window also was filled with stained glass. This work was carried out by the Lancaster Partnership of Paley and Austin, but the work was not to the satisfaction of the church authorities. Around 1874 the church employed Sir George Gilbert Scott to completely refurbish the church as it is today. The total cost of the restoration was about £27,000. Organ. The organ was built in 1889 by the Belgian organ builder Charles Anissens. Various adjustments were made in the 20th century, before it was restored and enlarged between 2004 and 2006 by Nicholson. It has been recorded a number of times and is played by Daniel Moulton, the film and recording virtuoso. Music for organ. Organists George Fox, William Turner 1857, J.W. Wilson, J.E.W. Lord 1889–1894, Arthur Edgar Parry, Arthur Charles Edwards 1896–1901, George Patman 1901–1904, Bernard Johnson 1904–1909, Arthur Percy Stevenson California, 1912, Sidney Wheel 1914–1920, Arthur Robinson 1919–1947, Eric John Fairclough 1947–1950, Mervyn John Byers 1952–1957, Raymond Sunderland 1957–1977, Geoffrey Pearce 1984–1987, Michael Smith 1987, People connected to the Priory. St. John of Bridlington, English saint. Piers Langtoft, who wrote a history of England in Anglo-Norman verse. Robert of Bridlington, 4th prior and theologian. Sir George Ripley, 15th century English alchemist. Images. Priory Church, church stained glass.